Story 1. Penny Boudreau's daughter was missing. She appeared on television as the grieving mother, but it turns out she killed her 12-year-old daughter, Carissa, to preserve her relationship with her boyfriend. Carissa's father would have taken her. This is very sad. Story 2. Ian and Angela Diaz. The story appeared on 60 Minutes. In short, Ian, who was a deputy United States Marshal, claimed that his ex, Michelle Hadley, was posting rape fantasy advertisements on Craigslist in an attempt to get Angela raped. Eventually, Michelle was arrested and sat in jail for 88 days while police investigated the matter. During that investigation, they realized things did not add up. It was all a ploy to frame Michelle as part of a twisted plot to make her walk away from a condominium she had purchased with Ian. At first, it was assumed or implied that Angela alone was responsible. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, 5 years later, Ian was found guilty for his participation in the plot and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Story 3. Ana Julia Quezada. She was dating a divorced man who had an 8-year-old son. One day, the child went missing, and the news began interviewing the parents. She always stood next to the father, crying and begging the kidnapper, if they were watching, to please return the child. I remember this very vividly from watching the news. Turned out there was no kidnapping. She had killed the child on the very first day of his disappearance and pretended to be distraught around her boyfriend and the media. People believe she did it out of jealousy and in hopes of convincing her boyfriend to move to her country to get over his son. Her 4-year-old daughter had also died in 1996 under strange circumstances. Story 4. Recently, a man in a town in Ontario filed assault charges against his neighbor for spraying him with a water gun. The neighbor's story was first shared with the media, stating she could not return to work as school support staff until the charges were resolved. She explained that she was having a fun water gun fight with the neighbor's children and accidentally sprayed the man while he was mowing his lawn. A week later, his story was published in the newspaper. He reported receiving targeted harassment from this neighbor and others, likely because he is the only black person on the street in a small town, is in an interracial marriage, and shared security camera footage showing him casually cutting his lawn. The footage shows the neighbor actively telling the child to bring her the water gun while she stands behind him, then spraying him directly. The camera also captured audio of the aftermath, including repeated racial slurs. The neighbor claimed there was a language barrier misunderstanding, but the man is Canadian and speaks clearly. Story 5. In 1961, Captain Julian Harvey was found drifting at sea in a lifeboat with the lifeless body of a little girl named Renee Duperrault. When he was rescued, he explained that he had been hired by the girl's family to sail them around the Florida Keys for vacation in a ketch called the Bluebell. He went on to explain that the previous evening, a strong wind caused the mast to snap and pierce the hull, causing the ship to sink. Worse still, a fire broke out, separating him from the family and the only other crew member, his own wife. He got into the lifeboat hoping to swing behind and get through the cabin from behind, but the ship had sunk rapidly. The only other person he was able to recover was the already dead Renee. Truly a tragic story. That was until 3.5 days later when Terry Jo Duperrault, the other daughter of the Duperrault family, was found drifting at sea in a small cork dinghy. She was dehydrated, starving, sunburned severely, but alive. When she was healthy enough to make a statement, the story she told was very different from Harvey's. She woke up to find her brother and her mother already dead, and when Captain Harvey saw her, he shouted at her to go back to her cabin. She did so, cowering under the covers, and said that Harvey was standing at the door of her cabin. She thinks he may have been holding her brother's rifle, but she is not completely sure. He eventually left, and when the water started to fill her room, she went up on deck. Harvey helped her to undo the life raft. However, when the rope slipped through her fingers, he dove into the water after it, leaving her on the sinking vessel. She then remembered the cork dinghy and crawled into it. Her account is very different from Harvey's, and most notably, there never was a fire. Sadly, we will likely never know the full story, as Harvey took his own life hours after Terry Jo was found. Story 6. In 1864, a train pulled into London carrying a bloodied, unconscious man, Franz Müller. Police were alerted, and when the man came to, Müller told them that as he was riding, two men approached him and tried to rob him. However, Mr. Müller fought back, was shot, and then left behind as the robbers jumped off the train. What actually happened was Franz Müller attacked Mr. Thomas Briggs, a 69-year-old banker, and robbed him of his gold chain and pocket watch. Later in the day, Mr. Briggs was found unconscious lying on the tracks because Müller shot him and threw him off the train. Briggs soon passed away from his injuries. Police were highly suspicious, and then a pawn shop owner came forward identifying Müller as the person who sold him Briggs' gold chain. London police issued a warrant. However, Müller had already fled the hospital and boarded a sailing ship for New York. Scotland Yard inspectors took a steamship to New York, beating Müller by weeks. They and an entire crowd were waiting at the docks when Müller arrived. That is the story of the first murder on a train. There is a book about it titled Mr. Briggs' Hat. Story 7. Corey Harris is the man who went viral earlier this year for appearing at a Zoom court hearing while driving on a suspended license. He spent 2 days in jail. It was then reported that Harris should have had his license reinstated 2 years earlier. Harris's attorney arranged interviews with local television stations to assert his innocence. Good Morning America featured a segment on Harris, advising viewers not to judge a book by its cover. Harris returned to court, where the judge did the necessary research and found that Harris had never held a license in Michigan or any other state, despite visiting the Secretary of State office multiple times to renew his identification. Although he had the opportunity to obtain a license, he chose not to. He went viral again due to lying and embarrassing many people along the way. Story 8. I used to install security cameras as a side job. I was asked to help a woman going through a horrible divorce. Her soon-to-be ex-husband was sending her threatening text messages from burner phones. He was coming by at all hours of the night, breaking windows, and a few times attempting to set their house on fire. A friend of hers reached out to me, explained the situation, and asked if I could help in any way. I purchased cameras and a network video recorder and went over one night in February to install the whole system, wires and all. I never felt scared during any of my installations, some of which were in really bad neighborhoods, but this man had me worried, so I did this job armed. After finishing up, I showed her how the system works and told her to call me if she ever needed anything else. A couple of weeks later, I received a call from a fire investigator asking for help recovering video. He told me that the man had returned, broke out a first-floor window, and threw in a Molotov cocktail, causing the first floor of the house to be engulfed in flames. The woman and her 2 daughters were trapped upstairs. The police arrived before the fire department and had to grab an extension ladder from a neighbor's house to rescue the family through a second-floor window. One of the girls was taken to the hospital for smoke inhalation. I walked the investigator through the process of pulling up the video. Once he got to the right time on the camera facing the bathroom window, he said, "The video just goes blank." I told him that I had set the video cameras to be very sensitive to movement, so the only way the video can go blank is if the camera is removed or damaged. I directed him to a camera that would cover the area under the camera that goes blank, and he should see someone tampering with it. He told me that nobody ever approached it. I then informed him that the only way this scenario is possible is if the man got into the house and disconnected the feed from inside. We ended the conversation since he would now need to review a lot of video to find this man entering the house. About a month later, while driving to work, I heard the woman's name mentioned on the radio during a news segment. I started paying attention and soon felt dizzy in my chair. It had not been her husband at all. She had been the one doing all these things to get her husband arrested and sent to jail. She had bought burner phones to send herself text messages. She had been going out at night to break the windows. She had been taking the family out to dinner, excusing herself to go to the restroom, then driving home to break a window and try to set the house on fire before returning to the restaurant. She had been the one to disconnect the camera from inside the house the night she almost killed her children in an attempt to frame her husband. I thought I was protecting her from a dangerous man, but it turned out I was helping the dangerous person. In summary, I thought I was helping a victim by protecting her from her soon-to-be ex-husband, but she was trying to frame him by risking her children's lives. Story 9. Belle Gibson claimed she had cancer and that she beat it through diet. She claimed to donate $1 million to a cancer hospital. She did not have cancer and did not make any donations. She lied about everything and portrayed herself as a victim. It is unknown how many people may have died following her advice. Story 10. Karen Matthews faked her daughter's kidnapping shortly after Madeleine McCann went missing to obtain money. She hid her daughter inside a bed at a friend's house and planned to collect the reward money. People felt sorry for her, believing her daughter was missing and that there was a major police investigation. She was later jailed for kidnapping, perverting the course of justice, and false imprisonment. Story 11. Katie Sorensen, the so-called mom influencer, claimed that a couple was following her through a shopping center, plotting to kidnap her children because they were so good-looking. However, the other couple was simply shopping at the same time and did nothing wrong. She was seeking attention and more followers. Story 12. I just listened to a podcast about a girl named Mackenzie Sharilla. She, her boyfriend, and another friend were involved in a crash that killed the boyfriend and the friend. She was the driver and survived. At first, it seemed like there was some fault in the car or that she simply lost control of the vehicle. But as the investigation continued, they realized she planned the crash and ran into the wall on purpose. It was a surprising story. I listened to it on the Sword and Scale podcast, episode 274. Story 13. Dave Kropa had been dating casually after his 12-year relationship ended and met a woman named Carrie Farver. They hit it off instantly and spent a lot of time together over the next few weeks. Then Carrie texted Dave at work and asked if they could move in together. This shocked Dave and he said no. Carrie then sent a very nasty response and basically told him to go away. Dave then started receiving numerous texts and emails from Carrie. The harassment, already relentless and almost daily, began to include other people in Dave's life, like his recent ex-girlfriend Liz Gollier. Liz became a constant target of Carrie's stalking and harassment. Things escalated. At one point, Liz's house burned down. As it turned out, Liz had killed Carrie, ostensibly out of jealousy over Carrie's quickly growing relationship with Dave. Liz then began impersonating Carrie and sending messages pretending to be her. Liz was behind all those messages. The whole story is absolutely wild. I suggest checking out the book A Tangled Web by Leslie Rule for the full story. It is truly extraordinary. Story 14. Mick Philpott wanted to show that his ex-partner was violent and dangerous to their children, and he wanted to play the hero. He devised a plan to set fire to his family home and rescue the children. Unfortunately, the fire spread faster than he anticipated, and all 6 of his children died. He then portrayed himself as the victim on television shows and news until it was discovered that he set the fire. Story 15. Brittany Norwood was a former soccer star who worked at a Lululemon athletic clothing store in an upscale, wealthy neighborhood. She had worked the night shift with her manager, and both were victims of a brutal robbery and murder. A coworker arrived at the Lululemon store the next morning, discovered the scene, and contacted the police. The manager, Jana Murray, was brutally murdered and stabbed over 60 times. Norwood suffered minimal injuries. Her pants were ripped, and she was tied up. Norwood claimed an African-American man first killed Murray, then approached her, ripped her pants apart, and raped her. The police initially believed Norwood's story and sent her home. During the investigation, the police discovered text messages from manager Jana Murray revealing that Norwood had been stealing merchandise. Murray was planning to confront Norwood about the theft and then fire her. The police soon made Norwood a suspect, especially after finding Murray's car, with Norwood's blood inside, parked 3 blocks away from the store. Norwood claimed the robber told her to move the car, then walk back to the store, where they would kill her. The police found this explanation implausible, questioning why she would be allowed to leave and then return after being permitted to leave. She was arrested, charged with murder, convicted, and sentenced to life without parole. It was later revealed at her trial that the entire murder was overheard by several people who did not intervene. An Apple Store employee overheard women fighting and assumed it was just drama. Story 16. Tracy Andrews appeared on television appealing for the road rage driver who killed her boyfriend to give himself up. The truth was that she was the one who had stabbed her boyfriend over 40 times until he died. Story 17. Joe Glinowitz, an Illinois police officer, staged his suicide to make it appear as though he was murdered by assailants. Police and the community rallied behind his widow for weeks, searching for the assailants. Funds were collected and donated, and tributes were made. It later emerged that he committed suicide because he had been embezzling money from a police program and was about to be discovered. Story 18. Tracy Andrews immediately came to mind. She insisted that her boyfriend was killed in a road rage incident. This occurred in the 1990s in the United Kingdom. The police organized a press conference to appeal for information, but it was designed to catch Tracy in a lie. She told the story incorrectly because she could not remember her lies. Tracy had stabbed him 42 times. Story 19. Years ago, there was a local news story about a woman who was caught shoplifting baby supplies and formula. The police officer who responded took pity on her because she had a young child and no money. Instead of arresting her, he bought the items for her. A local business even offered her a job, and I happened to know the owner. A few days after the story, I asked him if she got the job. He said no because all of her references described her as a serious kleptomaniac. Story 20. It is small potatoes compared to most of these, but our city recently held its annual marathon. One man posted on the city subreddit that he had been drugged at one of the water stations and asked for advice on the next steps. The next day, the news story came out that a man running in the marathon had acted erratically and attacked people. He claimed he was drugged. About a month later, it was revealed that the man had a casual methamphetamine habit and thought it would help him run faster. He took too much, had a violent paranoid episode, and attacked random people. Story 21. I don't remember her name. I think it was Sherry Papini, but I watched a YouTube video about a girl who faked her own kidnapping and tried to play victim. While all the resources were focused on finding Sherry, another woman was actually kidnapped. She ended up serving jail time. Story 22. Alicia Esteve Head is a Spanish businesswoman who claimed to be a survivor of the attacks on the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, under the name Tanya Head. She joined the World Trade Center Survivors Network support group, later becoming its president. Her name was regularly mentioned in media reports of the attacks. In 2007, it was revealed that Head's story was a hoax. She was not in New York City on September 11, 2001, but was attending classes in her native city, Barcelona. Story 23. It is local in Greece, but it has no precedent so far. A woman named Rola Paspirigou is accused of killing all 3 of her children out of spite and jealousy for her husband. They had an on-and-off relationship. She became pregnant and they got married. She gave birth to 3 girls. The second daughter was in the early stages of leukemia, but the doctors considered her condition manageable. She died unexpectedly and without any cause related to her illness. At some point in the same timeline, the first daughter was also admitted to the hospital. 3 years later, the third daughter died in her crib. Sudden infant death syndrome was considered the cause of death. Special tests for hereditary diseases came back negative. The only remaining child, the first daughter, ended up in the hospital once again. While being treated, she went into a type of shock. They revived her after trying for 50 minutes. She recovered but became tetraplegic. One can imagine how everyone viewed her. The poor woman with the unfaithful husband who lost 2 children, and her last child was left with special needs. That was until her daughter died while at the hospital. Now all 3 children were gone. The prosecutor got involved, and the investigation began. Coincidentally, a child was either admitted to the hospital or died whenever the husband had left the house or moved out. Currently, she is incarcerated with a life sentence, convicted of killing her 3 children. Story 24. Stephen Grant was my neighbor. His wife disappeared, and he was all over the news asking for help to find her, pretending to cry as much as possible. It turned out he had her torso in his garage, and the rest of her dismembered body parts were scattered in the Metro Park behind our neighborhood, including her head. Story 25. Anna Ayala claimed she found a fingertip in a bowl of Wendy's chili. The press coverage caused the company over $20 million in losses. It turns out the finger came from a coworker of her husband who lost it in a work accident, and she intentionally planted it. Story 26. Natalia Grace's adoptive parents claimed she was an adult when they adopted her. She was actually a child, not the diabolical mastermind like in the movie Orphan. Story 27. Diane Downs. The short story is that she showed up at a hospital claiming a strange man had accosted her and her 3 children, tried to carjack her, then started shooting. One of her daughters was already deceased, her other daughter had a stroke, and her son was injured so severely that he was left paralyzed from the waist down. However, what actually happened was that Diane had been involved with a man at her work. The man was married but had an affair with her. He wanted just a casual fling and ended up reconciling with his wife, but Diane became obsessed with him and wanted more. He had been open about not wanting children, so Diane tried to take care of the problem by killing her kids, thus, in her mind, removing any obstacle to them having a relationship. Story 28. Susan Smith was all over the news begging for the return of her 2 boys who were toddlers. She stated she had been carjacked. After several days, it was discovered that she had let her car roll into a lake with her babies strapped into their car seats. I will never forget hearing it on the radio while driving home from work. My children were their age at the time, and I had to pull off the road because I could not see through the tears. Story 29. The Charles Stewart case in Boston in 1989 involved a husband and his pregnant wife, Charles and Carol Stewart. They were reported attacked in their car at night. The wife was killed, and the husband was badly injured. A large police manhunt was launched for the killer, who was alleged by the husband to be a black man. After much investigation, it was revealed that the murder was carefully staged by the husband. Charles Stewart killed himself when he was about to be charged with murder. Story 30. Bethany Storrow was the victim of an acid attack that was racially motivated in Vancouver, Washington. Turns out she injured herself while attempting to commit suicide with acid. She decided not to drink it after pouring it on her face. I remember watching an unstable interview after the truth was revealed. Her reasoning was that the attention would allow her to share her beliefs about Jesus. Story 31. LaDonna Humphrey is a true crime podcaster, foster mother of 5, founder of multiple charities focused on cold cases where only the victim's body was found, and director of a sober living facility. I highly recommend Who's Afraid of LaDonna Humphrey, as this is just the tip of the iceberg. She harassed her co-hosts on a podcast through fake online accounts for content. It was only when she took a screenshot while still logged in as one of the harassing accounts and sent it to her co-host that things began to unravel. She somehow gained police access to case files of Melissa Witt by masquerading as a private investigator and uploaded footage of the victim's body being found to YouTube. She accused an innocent bystander of the murder on her podcast. The charities? She was using them as her personal piggy bank. The sober living facility was run like a cult with blatant financial fraud, overcrowding, slave labor, and stealing funds meant for the business. One of the foster children is a convicted sex offender who also works as the handyman for a women's sober living facility. Story 32. Carla Leanne Homolka, known as the Barbie in the Barbie and Ken Killers, was initially seen as a victim of Paul Bernardo's abuse, forced into participating in his rapes and murders. This included the case where Paul raped and accidentally killed her younger sister, Tammy Homolka. She reported Paul to the police after a severe beating that left her hospitalized. She received a plea deal, and her lawyer suppressed tape recordings that showed her willingly participating in the rapes and murders. By the time this information surfaced, it was too late to revoke the plea deal. Paul was arrested and remains in prison. She was released and now works with children in a school. Her case remains highly controversial because, although she was abused, evidence showed her voluntary involvement in the crimes. She later married the brother of the lawyer who represented her. She lives a normal life while the 3 teenagers she helped kill never had theirs. Story 33. Helena Taylor was the original voice actress for Bayonetta in the first 2 games. About 2 years ago, She made an angry statement claiming she was offered a rather low amount of money for the third game and was then replaced by Jennifer Hale. The overall impression was that the low offer was intentional to remove her. She insisted that fans should boycott the game. The response on Reddit was immediate, with people defending her and criticizing Platinum Games. Slowly, more details emerged. She was apparently demanding an excessive fee plus royalties. She had lied or deliberately misrepresented the deal previously. Over time, she appeared increasingly unhinged and vindictive, believing she was solely responsible for the success of the games and irreplaceable. For several days, new information surfaced daily, making her look worse. This situation demonstrated how public opinion can shift quickly as facts come to light. It highlighted the importance of understanding all perspectives and not falling for rage-driven internet drama in fan communities. Story 34. In 2018, Susan Mize was a promising aspiring 17-year-old model in the Houston, Texas area. While taking a ride with a male friend, Preston Barry, two teenage males jumped into the car, threatened Barry with a gun, took his money, and forced him to go to an automated teller machine to withdraw money before he eventually escaped. Susan was the mastermind behind the whole incident. She was arrested, lost all her modeling opportunities, was sentenced to 7 years in prison, and now has a collection of mugshots to her name. In 2004, Marie-Léonie LeBlanc, a 23-year-old French woman, walked into a police station and reported that she had been physically and verbally assaulted on a Parisian rapid transit commuter train by 6 youths of Arab origin. She claimed that none of her fellow passengers intervened as the youths damaged her clothes, cut off locks of her hair, knocked over her 13-month-old baby's stroller, and drew swastikas on her stomach with a marker. The story made international headlines, with leaders of both France and Israel condemning the attack, which never happened. LeBlanc fabricated the story to gain attention from her family and significant other. She was sentenced to a 4-month suspended prison sentence, 2 years probation, and ordered to seek therapy. Story 35. Ashley Todd was a college Republican and John McCain campaign worker who claimed she was attacked by a large black man outside of an automated teller machine who carved the letter B in her cheek. The backwards B was carved by herself while looking in a mirror. Story 36. Lochte. Ryan Lochte and 3 other Olympic athletes lied about being robbed at gunpoint while out in Rio. Turns out they were drunk, went to a gas station, and Ryan vandalized part of it after urinating in public. He was suspended and lost 4 sponsorships, among other consequences, when the lie was uncovered. Story 37. Alex Murdaugh received a lot of sympathy for the murder of his wife and son, and his attempted murder. When it was revealed that he had stolen millions from his legal clients, likely arranged for his wife and son's deaths, and definitely arranged for his own attempted murder, it was not a good look. Did I mention all the drugs? There were many of those. Story 38. Christopher Watts. Horrible what he did, and to have the audacity to go on the news and lie about wanting his wife and daughters to return. I am glad he is rotting away in prison. Story 39. Brent Bogseth killed his wife, Kimberly, and took her phone to send numerous messages and Facebook posts pretending she had left him and their child to run away to California to become a porn star. This was somewhat believable if you knew Kim from her party days, but not if you knew how much she loved her son. He posted those messages from her phone and argued with people through her messages until the police became involved because her sister suspected something was wrong. In reality, he had killed her and was pretending to be a grieving single father whose wife had left him, but he had actually killed her after discovering her affair. Story 40. Carolyn Bryant claimed that Emmett Till harassed her, but she did not disclose that her husband murdered him. Story 41. John Bobbitt. His wife Lorena was seen as a psychopath for cutting off his genitalia. Later, it was revealed that he had been abusing her, assaulting her, and being unfaithful to her. Story 42. That story about the Vallejo couple where the girlfriend was kidnapped and the police decided the boyfriend did it, and everyone shamed him. But then it turned out that the police did a terrible job and it was an actual kidnapper the whole time. Story 43. Chris Benoit. At first, everyone assumed that someone had killed him, his wife, and his 8-year-old son. Then it was discovered to be a double murder-suicide that took place over 2 to 3 days. His son was in the house with the body of his deceased mother for part of that time, and Chris was with the bodies of both of them for a while longer. World Wrestling Entertainment held a memorial episode of Raw the day after the three of them were found. A few days later, they revealed the actual truth. Story 44. Bobish Anagnostopoulos, a 33-year-old man, murdered his 19-year-old wife, Caroline Crouch, and falsely claimed that burglars were responsible. The truth was revealed after evidence contradicted his story, leading him to confess. Story 45. The woman who was not at the Twin Towers, Tanya Head, claimed to have escaped from the South Tower. She also stated that she lost her husband in the North Tower. She did some good by advocating for the survivors, but she was a total liar. There is a great book about it called The Woman Who Was Not There. I highly recommend it. Story 46. Trevor Jacob, the YouTuber who bailed out of his plane after an engine failure, but who it turned out had deliberately crashed it for views. Story 47. Scott Peterson was searching for his missing wife, Lacey. He killed his wife and knew it all along. What a scumbag. Story 48. The Roxanne Pallet Punchgate incident on Celebrity Big Brother involved her accusing another housemate, Ryan Thomas, of punching her. She spent the next couple of days convincing the other participants that this had occurred, generally turning the house against him. It was immediately evident to the audience watching at home that she was lying. However, the housemates initially believed her, confronted Ryan, and made his time in the house unpleasant. Meanwhile, Ryan was isolated, not knowing what his family or the general public thought. It was unfortunate that the producers allowed this to continue for so long. When the next eviction vote came, the housemates could hear the general public outside chanting Ryan's name and jeering Roxanne. At that moment, the other housemates realized the truth. Roxanne soon left of her own accord in disgrace and attempted to play the victim. It later emerged that she had lied in private settings with colleagues on multiple occasions. Her career is now seriously damaged. Ryan went on to win the competition. This situation was like a cruel social experiment that should have been stopped. Story 49. One local to me, Kashif Parvariz, claimed a gang attacked him, his wife, and their infant son as they took a walk after iftar, the evening meal during Ramadan. The wife died. He insisted it was a hate crime, which caused all the Muslims in the community to panic. Days later, the police found the murder weapon in the possession of his mistress, who had decided to help him kill his wife so they could run away together. I have never been so furious with any neighbor of mine. Story 50. So, this does not necessarily fit with all true crime cases involving victims who turned out to be perpetrators. But Shinzo Abe, Japan's former prime minister, was assassinated in 2022. The assassin, Tetsuya Yamagami, targeted Shinzo Abe for his support of the Unification Church. The assassin's mother was manipulated by the church, donating most of the family's possessions to it. This resulted in her children going without food and ongoing family strife, including the assassin's brother committing suicide and the assassin himself attempting suicide. The assassin initially targeted the leader of the church, but, being unable to reach them, instead targeted Shinzo Abe because of his and his family's close relationship with the church. The assassin believed that this support from Shinzo Abe and his grandfather, who was also prime minister, helped the church establish and thrive in Japan. The assassination highlighted the nature of the Unification Church and its influence in Japanese politics. Shinzo Abe's ties to the church were scrutinized, as were those of members of his cabinet and politicians still in office. It hastened the reshuffle of the then-ruling cabinet and led to 1 or 2 political resignations over ties to the church. It also exposed the media to criticism for its lack of reporting on the church's tactics and its victims. Furthermore, it generated legal efforts to strip the church of its religious incorporation, strengthen laws against cults and their activities, and adopt policies to aid victims, particularly the children of cult members. Finally, publicity around the church's activities and the assassin's plight have so affected Shinzo Abe's reputation and raised public sympathy for the assassin that prosecutors have not yet prosecuted him for the crime. Story 51. In the Fred and Rose West case, a 4-part series on the Morbid podcast, Many initially believed Rose was an innocent, brainwashed victim. However, she was not. Story 52. This is more obscure, but Andrea Yates's husband. She drowned their children after suffering from postpartum psychosis. Her husband left her alone despite her doctor instructing him not to leave her alone at any point. He bears some responsibility for the deaths of the children. He said that he wanted her to face reality and stop being depressed. They were also religious and told everyone they wanted to have as many children as God gave them. He was so delusional that he wanted to have more children with her through biological means or adoption after the murders. He has since remarried and had a child with his new partner, but they divorced. Story 53. Many Germans and other Europeans truly believed for years that Poland had attacked first when World War II began in Europe. Story 54. Joe Glinowitz was an Illinois police lieutenant who was apparently murdered. After a several-month investigation, it was discovered that he was not killed but orchestrated his suicide to make it look like a murder. This elaborate ruse was done when he realized his years of criminal activity were going to be exposed. He was embezzling money from the Police Explorer program, sexually harassing women and covering it up, abusing alcohol on the job, stealing police equipment, and trying to get the village administrator killed, among other things. Story 55. I worked at a newspaper in college. We covered a story about a student who claimed she had been gang raped by multiple men at a fraternity. It was a horrifying story that sparked police investigations and temporarily stopped social activities on campus. A few weeks later, someone caught her preparing to fake her own kidnapping and hostage situation. She was found taping her wrists and ankles together with duct tape and had written a sign that said, "Help me." When the police interviewed her, she recanted all allegations and admitted that she had made it all up. I still do not know what to make of that story. Story 56. I do not remember the details of the case and cannot find it in a search, but here are the details I do remember. There was a man who had an argument with an Uber taxi driver after his wife complained about him. They were harassing each other back and forth. Then, the Uber taxi driver ended up dead in that man's apartment. The man claimed self-defense, saying the driver broke in and was trying to attack him and his wife. The man was praised as a home defender and for protecting his family. It turned out he sent a note to the driver to come to his house so they could work things out. When the driver arrived, the man invited him in and shot him. The whole situation was staged. Everyone believed it and praised the man for killing another person, boosting his ego. Later, it was revealed to be premeditated, and everyone was shocked. Story 57. McDonald's, I guess, in the hot coffee lawsuit. It is tough describing a massive corporation as a victim, but people were definitely on their side until the details of the lawsuit came out. Story 58. Brian Banks, a high school football player, stood out. He was black and went on a high school field trip when he was accused of rape by a white female student. She later admitted she lied. Her parents put her up to it so they could sue the school. They won $1.5 million. She could not come forward earlier because her parents would have had to repay the money. Brian served 6 years for a crime he did not commit. Her parents were eventually sued and had to pay back the money they won, plus more. Some stories just stick with you, and this one always has for me, probably because I had teenage boys at that time. Story 59. That Kuwaiti girl who told about how Iraqi soldiers entered the hospital and threw babies out in the street. Story 60. Diane Downs. If you have not watched a video about this woman yet, head over to YouTube. She is seriously pathological. Story 61. The real mystery is why I ruin my day by visiting these kinds of threads and going down the Wikipedia rabbit hole. Story 62. Anna Ayala, also known as Wendy's Chili Girl, bought some chili from Wendy's. She was startled to find a finger in her chili cup. She tried to sue Wendy's, claiming the restaurant was selling human chili. Although the lawsuit did not proceed, Wendy's lost about $2 million. The police investigated the Wendy's location she visited but found no evidence of human tissue, flesh, or fingers in the chili station. They examined the employees, and all fingers were accounted for. The finger found appeared cooked but was not heated to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the temperature Wendy's usually cooks their chili to. Ana Ayala and her husband were arrested immediately. It was later revealed that she inserted her own finger into the chili to stage an extortion. Her husband obtained the finger from a colleague who had suffered an industrial accident. Ana Ayala was sentenced to 9 years in jail, and her husband to 12 years. Ana was pardoned 4 years early due to good behavior. Story 63. When I was in college, a young woman claimed she was getting into her car when someone shoved her into it from behind and attempted to assault her in broad daylight. She said they stopped and took off when another car rolled through the parking lot. The story sounded suspicious, so many people were skeptical at first. This led to an outpouring of support, with notes appearing all over the school that said, "I believe her." There was much discussion about victim blaming and the need to support victims. About a week and a half later, after news stations requested an interview, she recanted her story and admitted that she had made the whole thing up for attention. What really angered me about that situation was that she gave ammunition to those who claim that women fabricate assault accusations frequently. Story 64. Michelle Carter was an 18-year-old woman dating a 17-year-old man, and the man killed himself. Tragic for her, right? No. She encouraged him to kill himself to such an extreme extent that she was held legally responsible for his death. He stopped his suicide attempt in the middle, and she ordered him to follow through. Most people only heard of the case because of her trial, but one of my close friends attended her high school at the time, and those who knew about it before the trial were definitely surprised. She ended up serving 11 months. Story 65. Alan Lee Phillips was miraculously saved from a snowstorm after his headlights were seen from a passenger airplane. Nearly 40 years later, it was discovered that he had just killed 2 women right before his truck got stuck. Story 66. Not really a bad person, but all my sympathy disappeared for the man who lost half of his face to cancer. They showed horrific pictures of his face decaying, then losing half of it and having to have a skin graft from his buttocks. Near the end of the article, they mentioned that he refused conventional medicine, and I just thought he was making a poor choice. Story 67. A woman claimed that some black men kidnapped and drowned her children, but the children were later found drowned in her car. Story 68. Jussie Smollett lied about "Make America Great Again" extremists, beating him up and pouring bleach over him while calling him racial epithets in Chicago, of all places. Story 69. A man had his penis cut off by his ex-wife. The woman was being abused, and English was not her first language. She was trying to say he was abusing her but did not know the exact wording. So she stated he would orgasm without waiting for her to orgasm, and the media reported it inaccurately. That incident, combined with a prior act of theft and an attack on her mother, really damaged her reputation at the time. The man's name was John Bobbitt, and her name was Lorena Gallo. John Bobbitt went on to have a negative reputation and continued harassing his ex-wife decades later. There was a case against him for spousal and child abuse involving his next partner, and other women have come forward to share their experiences of poor treatment by him. Over the years, Lorena Gallo sought mental health treatment and founded a non-profit organization. It appears she has tried to bring some good out of the situation. Story 70. The Catholic Church when Sinead O'Connor tore the Pope's picture up on stage. Everything she was making a statement about was completely true. Story 71. Watching the video of Mel Gibson from Australia's 60 Minutes was pathologically bizarre. Story 72. Anybody who suffered from Munchausen by proxy syndrome, particularly Mary Beth Tinning. Her unspeakable acts consisted of murdering 8 of her children when they were infants and making authorities and friends think she was a victim, and that those 8 children died of sudden infant death syndrome. Story 73. Casey Anthony is widely known due to the tragic case involving her daughter. She was accused of causing the death of her child and displayed behavior that many found disturbing. The information about her case is distressing to read. Story 74. John Bobbitt continued to abuse others after having his genital injury. Story 75. Balloon boy hoax. Panicked parents called police, claiming their young son was missing and had likely been carried aloft by a home-built helium balloon that peaked at 7,000 feet. Witnesses reported something had fallen from it while it was ascending. When the balloon eventually came down, the boy was not inside. The child was later found hiding in the attic. The incident was revealed as a publicity stunt when the child was asked by Wolf Blitzer why he was hiding and said to his father, "You guys said we did it for the show." The father, a failed actor and comedian, pleaded guilty to attempting to influence a public servant, was sentenced to 90 days in jail and fined $36,000. The mother received 20 days to be served on weekends. Both were later pardoned by Colorado Governor Jared Polis. Story 76. Dee Dee Blanchard was killed and her disabled daughter was kidnapped. She was well loved, so there was a lot of shock and sympathy for her daughter. It turned out that Dee Dee had been faking her daughter's disabilities and had been abusing her horribly. The killer was her daughter's secret boyfriend. Story 77. Susan Smith. On October 25, 1994, Susan Smith reported to police that her vehicle had been carjacked by a black man who drove away with her son still inside. For 9 days, she made dramatic pleas on national television for their safe return. However, following an intensive investigation and a nationwide search, she confessed on November 3, 1994, to letting her car roll into nearby John D. Long Lake, drowning her sons inside. Her motivation was reportedly to facilitate a relationship with a local wealthy man. Story 78. Charles Stewart in Boston claimed that he and his pregnant wife were shot in a carjacking committed by an African-American man. It was later revealed that he killed his pregnant wife and unborn child. Race relations in Boston worsened significantly. Story 79. Charles Stewart shot his pregnant wife and himself in a staged carjacking in a minority neighborhood in Boston. He blamed an anonymous black person. Stewart unintentionally caused himself more serious injuries than he intended, became disoriented, and had to be located by police cars sequentially running sirens while the 911 dispatcher listened over the open line. This was front-page news for days as the real story unfolded. Story 80. There was a case either this year or last year about a homeless man who gave a woman his last $20 so she could buy gas. She started a crowdfunding campaign for him, which raised a large amount of money. He claimed to be a veteran as well. However, the entire story turned out to be a scam. The gas assistance never happened. It was just a way to generate money for the woman, her husband, and the so-called homeless man. Story 81. Tawana Brawley. In 1987, Tawana Brawley, with support from Al Sharpton among others, made headlines with her allegations of being kidnapped and raped by a group of white men. However, these allegations were later determined to be a hoax by a grand jury. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.